if we have a narrative that's a negative view of children and that's what we're responding to, we end up winding ourselves up because we're not even seeing things clearly. We're simply seeing them through our mindset.
You're listening to the Mindful Mama Podcast, episode 260.
Today we're talking about how to resolve family conflicts with Katherine Winter Sellery. Welcome to the Mindful Mama Podcast, now with over 1 million downloads. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have, and when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of Mindful Parenting, and I'm the author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Hello, and welcome back to the Mindful Mama Podcast. I am so glad you are here. Welcome, welcome. In just a moment, I'm going to be sitting down with an awesome guest, Katherine Winter Sellery. She's a TEDx speaker, founder of the Conscious Parenting Revolution, and she is a mentor to thousands of parents around the world. We're actually going to have some conversations about how the way we parent our children actually relates to the criminal justice system. What do you think about that, Sora? Any thoughts on that? My daughter Sora is here.
Well, that's interesting.
According to Katherine Winter Sellery, it actually relates a lot. And in this episode, we talk about family conflict and the essential mindset changes we need to move to a more cooperative, compassionate model. And there's some important takeaways I want you to listen for. How we can't change others, but we can create the conditions for change to happen. How when we find ourselves needing to prove, it's actually proof of doubt. Pretty interesting, right? And how we can often have these compassionate goals, but we use unskillful authoritarian means. This is a great conversation, and you'll see that Katherine's point of views really coincide with mine in a huge way, and we could have talked for hours. I think you're going to get so much out of this conversation. I think that's all I have to say about it. We've been doing some fun Facebook Live events around here. I've been talking about how to handle 24/7 parenting burnout and why your kids don't listen to you in some quick Facebook Live sessions. And so if you want to learn about these as they come up, make sure you go to Mindful Mama Mentor and get on the mailing list so that you can be part of these sessions and ask your questions in real time. Okay, I think this is enough intro. Let's dive right in to this conversation with Katherine Winter Sellery. Katherine, thanks so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to have you here too. And I think you and I are in alignment in a lot of different ways, that things that we teach. And I'm so excited about that. But one of the things you really make really clear, and I think, and I'd love to dive into this first, is the way that we have as a culture a negative view of children. And I don't think like the average person really realizes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I'm pretty aware of, but you make it really clear. And I don't think we realize how we do this, how we kind of unconsciously think of children in a negative way. So I was wondering if you could kind of just start us off talking about
Sure.
that. And you make a great analogy, actually, like comparing it in one of your TED Talks to racism and ageism too.
Yeah, that is actually one of the ways that I demonstrate this ageism that we have within our perspective. You know, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that you probably talk in your courses about the story that we tell ourselves about behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so as parents, when we're looking at so-called quote unquote bad behaviors, it really is about the filter in consciousness and how we're explaining what we see and the behaviors that we see. So the language that we use, things like they're attention seeking, they're misbehaving, they're out to get me, they've got to learn. If you don't come down hard, it's going to just keep on happening. These are the narratives that we have when we're looking at the so-called bad behaviors. And I say so-called not because the behavior isn't possibly socially unacceptable or disturbing or something that we want to see the other person stop doing. I would say that those are more than likely all the ways that we would describe the behaviors that we're seeing, but the explanations that we have for them are something other than what we would have had if it had been our mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, uncle, person down the road having made the same behavioral presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we begin to realize that the way we talk about or explain to ourselves the behavior when it's a child, we can expose the fact that actually embedded in our own description of what we see is a negative view of children. And if we substitute race and an older person age-wise, we would explain it differently to ourselves. And it helps us see that, oh, wow, there is something about the fact that it's a child doing it that without even realizing it, I have a sense of they could have done better and they're choosing not to because they're out to get me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's this like battle. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like in some of the examples are, I think, really make that clear. Like they're trying to manipulate me, right?
Yeah.
Like I hear that, fairly often. And and we don't say that about like, say, I don't know, if we,
Italians.
yeah, exactly. Like that Italian down
Right.
the street is trying to
Greeks are
manipulate me
manipulating
or
me. Yeah.
whatever, right?
But
Like,
if we were to do it, we would notice that, oh gosh, we would stop ourselves
mhm,
because it's blatant racism.
mhm. Yeah, exactly.
But
Or
when we think
yeah,
about it as a
if we said
Greeks are
black
manipulative.
people are trying to manipulate me, like there
Yes, you
it's
would
very clear,
instantly
right? We would be
recognize,
like,
oh
oh,
my
that's
goodness,
racist. Yeah,
I need to think about the way I'm thinking.
yeah.
And, I need to unpack this. What happens when we say a race is that if we're self aware, we recognize instantly that there's prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't think about the prejudice we have against children because it's so deeply embedded in consciousness. And it's so often the way that people are explaining behavior rather than recognizing that behavior is the manifestation of whether someone's needs are met or not met. So when we look at people that are moving through life in very easy, graceful, lighthearted ways, you could say about that person that their needs are being met,
Mm-hmm.
and that that's a reflection of the fact that their needs are met. But if you see someone who's very upset, you could simply explain it as, wow, that person's struggling to meet their needs. They're
Mm-hmm.
dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in balance. They could use some support. I could throw them a lifeline. But we stop ourselves when we get judgment in the midst of the way we look at the behavior. Good, bad, right, wrong. Those stop us, our judgments. So observation without evaluation is the highest form of human intelligence. Krishnamurti said that. And when we reflect on what Krishnamurti said, observation without evaluation, we recognize that we spend our lives in evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
To observe the behavior without then sliming it with my perspective of the behavior takes a lot of effort.
It does. Now it's I think that it's hard to bring up, I think, this idea that judgment is problematic, like that our judgment is problematic because I mean, this, and if we kind of look at like, where does this come from? Like, where do these ideas come from? Like, we're steeped in a very judgmental culture, right? Like we're, in large part, this is a Judeo-Christian country, right? Where it's like you're judged on whether you're good or bad, going to heaven or hell, right? Or we're judged in our justice system. We're judged at school, the ABCD letter system. So to just like question judgment at all is a really difficult, I think, shift to make, to say that, well, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to judge, I'm not supposed to evaluate my children. What's going on there? How do you help people to start to understand looking at judgment in this new way?
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about retributive versus restorative justice.
Mm.
And so, there are a lot of people who are already on the path of restorative justice and the understanding that it's through restorative justice that transformation occurs.
Can
That
you sorry, define those for the listener who
Yeah.
hasn't heard the words retributive or restorative justice?
Yeah, sure. So retributive justice is based on punishment for past misdeeds. And so the focus of um, our own prison system is retributive justice. We're looking to punish people for something that they did that was wrong, and that is the foundation of our system and lots of other people's systems, not just ours. And restorative justice, which is, Marshall Rosenberg, the founder for the Center for Nonviolent Communication, is the father of restorative justice in America. And restorative justice is about giving people the skills to be able to move forward and respond when they're in similar situations going forward, to respond differently.
Yeah.
So that there is a way for that person to actually behave in ways that are less harmful to others and to themselves. So it's a skills-based approach. And it both acknowledge that we have a problem and both acknowledge that there's something that needs to happen differently.
Mm-hmm.
But one takes an approach that if you make someone pay for their crime, that will create transformation. And the other one says, until you learn a new way, you can be putting others and yourself at risk. And so we need to possibly continue to have people in captivity, if you will. But the purpose of being in captivity isn't to make them pay for their past misdeed as much as it is, we need to keep you away from doing harm to self and others until you have new skill sets.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. A new year is always a great time to discover new things about ourselves and our interests, and is just as important for the kids in our lives to make these same discoveries. And with a KiwiCo subscription, your child can discover something new all year long. Would you agree with that, Sora?
Yeah.
KiwiCo's seriously fun and innovative crates provide accessible science and art projects for kids of all ages. So right now, I have my daughter Sora here, and right now you're doing the advanced level doodle crate. What project are you doing right now in the doodle crate?
Paper lanterns?
Cool. And so far so good?
Yes.
And you have done the Tinker crates in the past, right? Do you like those?
Yes.
She would get super excited when these came to the house. And what were some projects that you liked the best?
I liked the hydraulic claw. It was cool.
But you could do that whole thing by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Do you think other people should let their kids try these out because they're super fun?
Yeah.
You can encourage your children to be innovators and creative thinkers. They won't believe what they can build and accomplish with KiwiCo. And when they're finished, watch their confidence be as big as their smile. It's hard to find new creative ways to keep the kids busy, like especially now. But KiwiCo does that legwork for you so you can spend more quality time tackling projects together. You get these real high quality engineering, science, and art projects for children. And, of course, the kid at heart.
It's true, they're pretty fun.
Start the new year with KiwiCo. There's no commitment, so you can pause or cancel anytime. KiwiCo is redefining learning with hands-on projects that build confidence, creativity, and critical thinking skills. There's something for every kid or kid at heart at KiwiCo. Get 30% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line with the code HUNTER at kiwico.com. That's 30% off your first month at kiwico.com, promo code HUNTER. I love this. I love that we're taking it right there to like comparing parenting to the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
Because it makes so much sense, because it really is true that what's in the micro in our families is what's in the macro. And you talk about that in your TED talk about how our authoritarian discipline is fueling violence and mental health. And I believe that and know that to be true, but it's really hard to I think wrap our heads around this. And I guess if we look at it kind of in the prison system, we can say, okay, I mean, most of us now know that the prison system is not working. It brings out people who are just more likely to do more crime. It doesn't reform them. Like, this is not reformatories. The way that doesn't really work. We need to teach people skills, right? And it's the same thing with our children. Like, they're meeting a need, and we need to teach them skills. I love that, that we take that there, right there, because it's hard to wrap our heads around how this, like, judgment of you and your behavior as bad is harmful. So maybe you can, like, let's take a step back and kind of walk through that.
Sure. So, I mean, when we recognize, here's the fundamentals. The fundamentals, Dr. Thomas Gordon, who your reader or your listeners may or may not be familiar with, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times based on the following. Discovery that when you use a controlling form of discipline, you activate retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. The 3 R's. So if you use that modality, then you are generating retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. And then Dr. Louise Porter, in her book, Children Are People Too, talks about 75% of our time we're dealing with disruptions that originated from my controlling form of discipline.
So I just want to underline this for the listener right here, because what Katherine just said is that our controlling form of discipline, it leads to, and it's been shown by research to lead to retaliation, rebellion, and resentment. So, dear listener, I just want you to just think about that for a minute. Like, when was the last time you used a timeout, or you used a threat, or you used a punishment with your child? And then, did that controlling form of discipline, did it lead to retaliation, rebellion, or resentment? And just take a moment to ask yourself that, because what you're probably going to find out is that it really did.
Yeah. So when you have activated the 3 R's, and then you find most of your time, 3 out of 4 of your subsequent disruptions resulted from that initial way of dealing with something. So the primary problems get lost. The primary issues that we're trying to actually attend to we've become so far away. We're dealing in the secondary issues. I had a client the other day talk to me about his daughter and his problem with her, and that, they had gone out for this outing. In the evening, they were with the other child going to go lie underneath the stars and have this great little wonderful camp out. And it was all ruined because she was walking 25 feet behind them and had a grudge and had this attitude and all this kind of stuff. And I was listening to the story and I was thinking to myself, that sounds a lot like a resentment flow. I said, gee, wonder what's going on for her. If you look at all behaviors as the breadcrumbs, the behavior themselves is a breadcrumb. It's information. It's not good behavior. It's not bad behavior. Behavior is information about what's going on within someone. And we can begin to look at the behaviors as the reflection of an inner world. So I just kind of said, gee, seems to me that this might be one of the R's. Was there something that preceded this? And he said, oh, well, yeah, I was really mad when she didn't practice her piano. Oh, I see. Well, what happened? Yeah, I screamed at her and I was, I overreacted. But then I apologized. So as if that's supposed to clear the air. And what I think we know is that when we lose it and we become abusive, that our demand that children therefore just get over it, and that we not experience what we've created by the way that we responded to something that we were upset about, is impractical. That there needs to be a healing process, but primarily what needs to happen is that the support that's needed for, in this case, the dad, when he gets triggered, to be able to deal within himself with what's going on internally, so that he doesn't then dump it as a toxic waste dump all over his child and then wonder why she's standing 25 feet behind him as they go out for this so-called wonderful time together. Well, it's not going to be wonderful if that's the way that this person responds to problems, disruptive problems, when a child doesn't do what they're supposed to do. So, I mean, that's the focus of the work that I do, is giving parents the skills that they need to be able to support themselves when they're triggered by something that's happening outside of themselves that they are trying to control, when in fact they themselves are completely out of control.
Yes, yes, that whole piece about lowering our reactivity, understanding why this thing is, causing such a big feeling for us. All of that work all has to happen before we even start to understand, like, what are the right words to say. We have to do
Totally.
that inner work of understanding ourselves, and to say, well, then let me just take a step back. Like, how that father, he understood that he had created this rupture, right, with his behavior, and he tried to make a repair. And how how could he have could he have healed that situation a little bit better, in from your point of view?
Yeah, well, I think that children are so beautiful because they are actually the ones that reflect back to us whether or not they experience us as authentic.
Hmm. Yes, they have
So,
incredible BS meters.
yeah, they're pretty amazing. If you need a really good BS meter, find a child
Yes.
who has not been conditioned to lie to you.
Hmm.
So if you can find a child who has not been conditioned to lie to you, then you may be blessed with the truth. And so, that may land differently for the listeners. In any event, we as parents tend to want our children to lie to us and tell us what we want to hear.
Hmm.
And so, I like to talk to parents about the behaviors that they're teaching their children to present,
Hmm.
and by doing that, the behaviors that they're teaching their children not to tell them
Yeah.
because they can't handle the truth. So going back to, what's the repair? I think the repair really is, the proof is in the pudding. Okay, Dad, so show me that you know how to manage yourself and I will trust you.
Mm.
And when, I can see that you can handle my no, then I will feel more free to be able to have open dialogue about the things that you want me to do and how I feel about it.
Hmm.
And so we can then go into healthy problem solving, which is kind of where that ultimately ended up going, which was that, well, yeah, but Dad, I don't like playing the same song over and over again.
Hmm.
And, I like the piano, but I don't like the way that this teacher programs me between my lessons about what I get to do. I want to talk about that.
There you go. What are the unmet needs underneath this behavior? Like, if we get stuck at the level of this solution, my solution is you do piano exactly how the teacher wants you to do it, and that's the only option. But if you dig a little, it's like, oh, well, what's going on? Why is this something you don't want to do? Like, what's really going on for here? And so, kind of what I hear you saying, Katherine, is that we should step back. Probably dad maybe needed to open himself up a little more vulnerably to say, oh, I really messed up and I'm feeling it and I feel really bad about it. And then say, what is really going on for you? Like, why is this? What's underneath this
Yeah,
sort of level of solutions that we're butting heads at?
right. And recognizing that all overreactions are goal oriented. And so when any of us are in overreaction, we're doing that to get what we want. So it's all about, how can I create an atmosphere through my explosiveness that will get the other person to do what I want them to do.
Oh, definitely. I see that in myself. Like when I'm overreacting, I'm like, I want you to do what I want you to do right now. And I can't handle anything but that. And so when parents find themselves in that, because we're human, right? Like we're imperfect and we're vulnerable and all that. So when we find ourselves in this place of overreaction, what do you what should we do? What should we do in those moments when we're like, like I'm so frustrated, right? We have to take care of that stress response. But tell us a little bit more about like what is this over what kind of bell of mindfulness should that overreaction ring for us?
So, what I like to support all of us with when we're in an overreaction is recognizing that our overreactions stimulate our need to prove. And needing to prove is proof of doubt. So,
Totally.
whenever we're trying to prove something, if there's at least a little bit of consciousness around the dynamic that we are able to reflect, oh, wow, I am totally trying to prove I'm right here. Needing to prove is proof of doubt. So something in me is doubting that I'm right. Because if I really knew that I was okay with my sense of things, I wouldn't be in proving. So the minute I'm improving is my like alarm that goes off around what's happening. So I can have an opportunity to go, oh wow, this actually has nothing to do with what is the surface issue. This is actually something in me has been activated. So all over reactions, although there's the trigger, whatever the moment in this very moment is activating, the underlying situation that's being catalyzed is something that pre-existed and it's older material. It's actually, I look at those people in our world that trigger us are actually the the healers on the healers for our own internal pain and wounds. They come along often in the form of our children because our children are so good at activating these pre-existing wounds. So that's my chance to step back and recognize, oh my gosh, I'm needing to prove something. And I'm also recognizing I'm in the midst of my own healing crisis right now. So rather than focus on this external thing, I'm going to step back and say, this has nothing to do with you. And be able to stop myself in my overreaction, turn to the person that I'm toxically vomiting all over, and turn to them and be able to say, wow, I am so sorry. I recognize this has nothing to do with you. And I'm going to take myself away and I'm going to see what I can do about supporting my own healing
That's
and
great.
and pull myself off this, present approach and attack of the other person and take myself out of the room until I'm able to address my underlying woundedness. Because all of our triggers are those pre-existing deeper places within us that are actually being agitated and irritated and that's so then when you begin to look at the protagonist in the story from the perspective of, oh my goodness, you've just helped me go directly to that place within me that needs the most love. Can I turn toward that within myself and be with it in a way in which it needs my company? Can I be present to myself?
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of work to do in those moments. And that's a wonderful call to action to say, to step back and to stop and to remove yourself. I'm so sorry. I realize this has nothing to do with you. I've got to go take care of myself. I've got some feelings I've got to take care of for myself. And that may be impossible in the moment if you have to like keep little ones safe or whatever, but take a moment and take that recognition, maybe write down that moment, what was happening,
Well, and
what
also
was triggering it.
recognize that the little ones are not safe when you're in that
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
There's nothing safe about it. In fact, it's
Yes.
the most unsafe place for them to be.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think that permission to remove yourself is really important. At one point, I remember my daughter was a toddler still in a crib, and I remember getting very triggered, and I put her in her crib I walked out of her room and I closed her door. I walked into my room. I went out onto my balcony and I closed my door, and she was crying. She wasn't happy, but that it was much better, much safer for me to just take myself outside and have that fresh air in that moment and give myself permission to do that and leave my unhappy child for a moment than to like you say, vomit my toxic trigger stuff all over her. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, we think that, I mean, we all know when we're triggered, it's hard for us to do the work. It's always better for us to use a preventative approach in general to life
Yes.
and, to get upstream. So upstream initiatives is, obviously, I think where all of us go is, gosh, am I doing all the things, all the practices? Am I doing my meditation? Am I doing the work that I get to do around my own self-healing, so that I come into my relationships with my children and other people in my world more conscious, more regulated, with my bandwidth as strong as it can possibly be for disruptions, for behaviors that are less than perfect, for the space to be the space for all of the ways in which people show up in ways that I wish they wouldn't. Can I do that and cultivate that within myself? So that's the best thing we can do, right? Is the upstream. Are there problems that I know downstream are going to happen every single day? And are there places in my life where I can solve those downstream problems at different times other than in the problem zone?
Yes. Yeah, preventative. And yeah, and not in that no problem zone. So what do you say then to the listener who's listening to this and saying, but I get so triggered when my 5-year-old hits my 2.5-year-old and it makes me crazy. And so let's take that information and bring it down to a real concrete example.
Yeah, great. So if you have a 5-year-old hitting a 2-year-old, and that I'm going to guess it probably isn't like it's a one-off, it's probably some kind of repetitive pattern, then I would say, again, it's information. It's information. So if we take it out of the good, bad, right, wrong, it's information, and it's also something we're not okay with. It's in the, yeah, but I'm not okay with it. It's information and I'm not okay with it. I want to really address the behavior. I would say, yeah, it's not okay with me too. It's definitely one of those safety issues. And human behavior is complicated. So if we look at it as information about the state of mind of the 5-year-old, then I would wonder what's going on for my little 5-year-old, that this is coming from them. And I would want to spend some time, not in the, conflict resolution is a fascinating thing, and how we address and influence other people's behavior is it's where I spend my life. What I know about changing other people is that we can't do it. They can change themselves. It's the only possibility. And we as adults can create the conditions under which change happens. So, my world is focusing on the ecosystems within families and the environments that we create for change to occur. So primarily with that in mind, and I see a behavior that, to me, when I look at it, I go, gosh, this is coming from someplace inside of this little one. I'm wondering and I'm curious about where that's coming from. So, and I know it's going to happen because it happens all the time. Again, this is where I want to talk about it when it's not happening, because you can't teach people to swim when they're drowning. So when I want to teach my swimming lessons, I don't pick the time when someone's drowning. I pick another time. And I sit down with my 5-year-old and I say, I've noticed that you really get frustrated with your little brother or sister. And that when you're super frustrated, you end up hitting them. Yeah, I get so mad. And, they grab my things, or you never spend any time with me, or you love them more. I mean, I don't know what the story is going to be, but I know there's going to be one. And for each and every 5-year-old, it's going to be a different story. It's either going to be you love them more than me, or you spend more time with them than me, or they always take my things and you don't do anything about it and it's unjust. Underneath is always an unmet need. Is it the need for connection, the need for love? Is it the need for, I don't know, because I have to really sit and be with them and create the atmosphere for them to come and be forthcoming. so that we can connect with whatever sort of conversations and healing balms will support the transformation. It comes from within. So people who use the behavioralist approach are going to do something to the child. They're going to do a reward or a punishment or a timeout or a this or a that or another thing, just like we do with restorative versus retributive justice. And what we know is that very rarely do people change because of something you do to them. They may change the behavior because they're afraid of you, but they won't change their behavior for the reasons that you want them to, out of consideration for the other person, or out of having the skill to be able to advocate for their unmet needs, or have the capacity to be able to speak about their feelings and tie it back to the needs of theirs that aren't being met. These are things we teach people to be able to do. And so rather than get mad at someone for not having skills, we teach them the skills.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. Now that the holidays are over, it's all too common to set health goals that never actually stick. New Year's resolutions of the past, we're looking at you. But when it comes to eating better and consuming less sugar, let's be honest, most healthy snacks don't taste very good, they don't fill you up, and they don't really satisfy your cravings. I'm excited that this episode is sponsored by Monk Pack, who makes snacks that taste like our favorite sugary treats, but with 1 gram of sugar or less. Monk Pack Keto Granola Bars contain just 1 gram of sugar, 2 grams of net carbs, and they're only 140 calories. They're great for anyone who's following a keto lifestyle, but also the perfect snack for anyone who is trying to eat better or cut back on sugar or carbs without sacrificing taste. I always try to eat real food that tastes really great, and I want to eat food that's really satisfying. And the Monk Pack Keto Granola Bars are wonderful, and they're super satisfying and really yummy. They have a soft and chewy texture and come in delicious flavors like coconut, cocoa chip, maple pecan, and peanut butter. My favorite flavor is the Monk Pack Sea Salt Dark Chocolate Keto Nut and Seed Bar. It is super yummy, I have to say. Although I haven't been able to try all of them because my family has been eating them up like crazy because they love them. They're perfect for a quick breakfast, a snack between Zoom calls, or the late night treat. In addition to being keto-friendly, the bars are also gluten-free, grain-free, plant-based, and non-GMO, with no soy, trans fat, sugar alcohols, or artificial colors. They taste incredible, and you can't beat the low sugar, nutrition, or taste they provide. And by shopping online, you can avoid another trip to the grocery store by getting Monk Pack delivered right to your door. Try it for yourself, and you'll see. And we have a special deal for our listeners. Get 20% off your first purchase on any Monk Pack product by visiting monkpack.com and entering our code HUNTER at the checkout. And Monk Pack is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll exchange the product or refund your money, whichever you prefer. To get started, just go to monkpack.com. That's MUNKPACK.com and select any product. Then enter the code HUNTER at the checkout and save 20% off your purchase. Monk Pack, delicious, nutritious food you can count on. We thank them for sponsoring the podcast. So when we're looking at family conflicts, kind of the general way that we're resolving family conflicts, whether it be between siblings or an adult and child, is mom or dad is the judge and jury, and they push down the solution onto the child. But very rarely do people change their behavior because of what you do to them. And they find it frustrating.
But you do activate retaliation, rebellion, and resistance.
Exactly.
And you do get the resentment flows flowing.
Yes.
And as a result of how poorly you handled that initial problem, you created 3 more problems.
Yes.
And then you've spent all your time dealing with the resentment flows that were activated by the way that you dealt with the initial issue.
So what is a better mindset for us to be approaching family conflicts with? How can we change the way we approach these for a healthier dynamic?
Yeah. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, If we look at everything as an observer, I'm the observer, and I'm having the capacity to observe rather than evaluate. So if I'm an observer, I'm not saying this is good and this is bad. I'm simply saying, wow, when you grab the toy from your sister,
Yes.
rather than when you were such a bad boy.
Yeah.
So it's changing my framework, it's changing my language. When we shift the way we see behavior as the good, bad, right, wrong, and we see it as the manifestation of unmet needs. And I like to say the tragic expression of unmet needs. So if it's a tragic expression of an unmet need, we then get curious about the underlying needs that are not being met. And with that curiosity, we lean in and listen rather than start some monologue, of moralizing, preaching, advising sort of monologue. Basically, all of the things that we do now get in the way of actually supporting people in regulating their nervous system. And when people are triggered and they're dysregulated, they're so stuck in the amygdala and the fight flight response that there's no space for them to be able to respond differently. And we can break it down, we can deconstruct the mind. And we know by deconstructing the mind, we recognize that people are actually responding to their own narrative and the way that they're describing things. Back to, again, the negative view of children. If we have a narrative that's a negative view of children and that's what we're responding to, we end up winding ourselves up because we're not even seeing things clearly. We're simply seeing them through our mindset, our filter in consciousness. So awareness is pretty much most of the trick. The awareness around, oh, wow, I've fallen into that pattern again. The awareness around, oh, wow, I'm noticing that I'm proving. Oh, wow, that must mean I'm trying to prove a lie within myself because I myself doubt it. I mean, it's all the work, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, I can imagine and I agree with you in a bazillion ways, and that mindfulness is the key. Like, as we start to train the mind to understand, as we start to be able to see things, as we start to be able to see our judgments, we start to see our stories, we start to be aware of these views, and we start to see these needs. No, but I can imagine the listener saying, okay, like I'm trying to look at my child's behavior. This, like, what I have been seeing as bad behavior is like maybe unhealthy, maybe uh, antisocial or whatever, like behavior with their siblings or with me, or yelling and impoliteness or whatever it is. I'm trying to see these behaviors unmet needs, but but we also want to look at, like, what are the parents' needs, right? Like, what are your own needs? I mean, I can imagine the listener saying, like, am I just supposed to meet all of my child's needs? What about everybody else in the family? So as we think
Yeah.
about sort of conflicts like that, how would you respond, I suppose, to that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, if we go back to a moment of reflecting, what is your approach? Is it retributive or restorative? Is it teaching skills or is it making people pay for their past misdeeds? If it's punishments and rewards, there's a goal. The goal behind punishments and rewards is different than the goal to the guidance approach, which is the program that I run. So I teach a guidance approach to parenting, and a guidance approach to parenting is about teaching skills, and it's also about teaching skills to get to a different goal. The goal of a guidance approach is teaching consideration of yourself and others' needs. The goal of a behavioralist or a controlling form of discipline is to teach children to be obedient and compliant and to do as they're told. So if you are looking at what you're using as your modality without having an awareness of what your goal is, that place within you that you're actually coming from by using that modality, what I found over the years, and I've been doing this for a long time, is that parents are using a behavioralist approach, but they actually are hoping for the goals of a guidance approach,
Yeah.
not recognizing that a behavioralist can never achieve the goals of consideration. They're not possible, because when you focus on obedience and compliance, you're focusing the mind of the child on what they're going to get or what's going to happen to them,
Mm-hmm.
Versus when you're using a guidance approach, you're not focusing on the mind of the child on what they're going to get or what's going to happen. You're supporting them in beginning to understand other people's experience of their behavior and the needs of yours that aren't being met when this behavior is their solution to meeting their needs. So it's a complete shift by creating a different atmosphere, by using a different modality. So parents have been taught through their own life experience, and as you mentioned, it's everywhere. It's in our school systems, it's everywhere, that it's about what you do to people. It's about the reward or the punishment. It's what you do to people that gets them to shift their behavior. And we can say, sure, we have lots of evidence that when you do certain things to people, you get a shift. But again, we're back to, why are you getting the shift? Is it because they're considerate of your needs and they've understood your perspective? Because they've deeply begun to embody consideration and shift on the behalf of that understanding? Or are you getting the shift because they're afraid of you? And because you do, as we all know, there's naturally a power differential between an adult and a child that is then being exercised by the parent to use control because they have got power over the other to get them to change on the basis of what I can do to you.
Yeah.
I can completely limit your access to the things that you enjoy. And therefore, I can manipulate you. Bye-bye. Yeah, iPad, dates with friends, coveted desserts, all the things that are expressions of, that person's joy in life can be taken away. And so if I do that and I threaten you and I use that as the cornerstone of my parenting, then basically the cornerstone of parenting is I make you dependent on me and afraid of me.
And then there's resentment that flows.
And then you create the 3 R's.
For years and years and years. And the thing is that ultimately we lose that control, right?
We do.
The more we use power, the less influence we have. And we're all going to lose that control as our kids become more independent. I have a 13-year-old. As a 13-year-old, she's got her own phone. Soon she'll be driving. She'll be able to take herself to places. She'll be able to do lots of different things. If I've been using power and using control over these things all the way up until now, then when I lose that, when she suddenly is much more independent, then all that's left is the resentment. There's none of that connection that I see you. I see what your needs are. These are my needs. There's none of that there. So if we're we get in this mode of, I think you're absolutely right, that like parents want to have their kids behave and cooperate because of consideration for others. But the methods we use are these authoritarian methods because that's just what's in the soup of our culture, and that's how we were raised. And then we're kind of surprised that our kids aren't considerate of our needs. But yeah, I would be resentful of you too if you took away my iPad, Katherine.
Yeah, so we know those goals are unexamined.
Yes.
And it really is then a shifting away from, I don't know, I mean, I bet you find this too, is that it doesn't take very long for the parent community that I work with to go, oh gosh, that's not what I wanted. I did want a shift in behavior, but not because they're afraid of me.
Yes.
I mean, I've taught thousands of people. Rarely have I ever found anybody who's like, I don't care what the reason is. I just want the change. Actually, people are more complicated. They want the change, and they also want it to come from a place within that is the right place. So then it's the work of actually creating a whole different ecosystem. And, that's the longer road.
Yeah.
The road to, and I like to use the example of, maybe you play tennis and you've had the experience of what it's like to learn a new skill. Just because you have a coach who teaches you how to hit topspin or tells you how to serve a ball doesn't mean that you can go out on the court and do it. You have to go out and practice. Mm-hmm. You have to throw that ball up and you have to come down on it and you have to keep hitting that ball across and over and over and over again. And that is how we learn a way to create an atmosphere and show up so that we can solve conflicts in ways that don't generate the 3 R's. How we can be with our kids around just everything in life in ways that are different than the way that we had been using a controlling form of discipline. It's just truly like going out on the tennis court every single day. And it helps to have a coach. It helps to have someone. It also helps to have a community. So what we need is we need to create the space for transformation and have the self-acceptance to not be great at it and to be okay with ourselves as we are transforming the way we approach conflict.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you and I are in very similar positions, and it is a longer road. It's like it takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more diligence. And I was going to ask you, how do you help people through that messy middle where the kids are still like, the way I describe it is like they've been like a train going 90 miles an hour of resistance to everything you've been saying, right? Because it's been this controlling form and this the retaliation, rebellion and resentment, right? So they've been resisting everything. And then as you start to shift, as you start to change, as you start to move, how do you help people through that messy middle part where it takes some time to like slow that train down, stop the train, and even turn it around completely in the other direction?
I like to work with the whole family. And I was just I had a call this morning with a client, a 21-year-old client. And I'm working with his parents and his brother and the whole group. And he's the one that's so aware. He's aware of the whole thing. And he's just so frustrated that his parents are taking so long to learn the skills.
Huh. Yeah.
And that they just don't listen, he says to me. They just don't listen. And I'm like, I know. They're not listening. They're doing the roadblocks. They're advising, they're lecturing, they're moralizing, they're preaching, they're diagnosing, they're questioning, they're doing everything but listen.
Mm-hmm.
They just can't hold the space and be with you and be present to you. Instead, they co-opt and they want to get into controlling through all of these different approaches. And, it's well documented that anything but actively listening is not going to support the other person. Marshall Rosenberg, who was one of my teachers, Marshall used to say, before you start advising someone, have them write down on a piece of paper, sign their name, and get it notarized that they want your advice. Because he says, I can tell you, it's so uncommon that someone is actually asking for your advice. And don't insult them that they're so stupid that they don't know what's right for them. All they wanted was a sounding board. Be there, stand there, hold the space. But dear God, don't think that they need you to figure out how to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I agree.
It's just downright insulting.
Oh my God. I have a friend who goes into some advice often in conversations, and it's so frustrating.
It's so irritating.
Irritates the bejesus out of me. Yeah.
It really does. It's so irritating. And we might think that our children are stupid and they need our advice. They really aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Even young children can be empowered and have the solutions come from within. Yeah. So, I spend a lot of time talking about motivation in my course, and motivation is a huge subject with regard to, most parents want their kids to be intrinsically motivated. They want them to be self-starters. They want them to have it coming from within. And yet everything they do is about an external locus of causality. Everything they do is about controlling people from outside. Everything they're doing is creating a world in which it's about what other people think of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, we don't have time to go into socially prescribed versus self-referenced. But when we look at, this idea of creating a world in which children are looking everywhere about, am I doing it the way other people want me to do it? Am I meeting other people's expectations of me? Is so-and-so proud of me? Is so-and-so happy with me? I mean, oh my goodness gracious. Are they happy with themselves? Are they measuring themselves against, wow, I put a lot of effort in. I feel so much better about my own depth of understanding. That makes me feel really good about it. That's the motivation that we want kids to have from within, that sense of deep satisfaction of mastery, but not, is mom happy with me or dad happy with me? is my teacher happy with me? No, I'm happy with me. I feel great when I apply myself. That's what motivates me, is from within.
Yeah, and that care and that connection for the other. I could probably talk to you about all of these things for a long time, Katherine, because
I'm sure we could go on for
we could
hours.
keep going
Yeah,
on and
we
on.
could go forever and ever. Yeah,
But
exactly.
I really want to just appreciate, what you've said, talking about bad behavior, talking about the language that you use about kids, thinking about how we very rarely do people change because of what we do, and inviting the listener to think about, like, are your goals unexamined? Like, really, what are your goals? And can you get the support you need to create a new ecosystem, to learn a new language, to get that top spin on your tennis. That's it's so beautiful. Do you have any final thoughts or words for the listener who's like, I'm trying to imagine now, maybe the listener, maybe this is her first episode and this is like new stuff to her, and you've just been like blown over by, wait a second, I've got to re-examine some things. What are maybe some thoughts for that person?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an overwhelming journey.
Mhm.
And I guess what I would like to say is that this is a life journey, and your children have given you the most beautiful opportunity to be able to get triggered and start the work of your internal world and creating new ecosystems around just parenting and home and safety and psychological safety and discovery and conflict resolution. And these are great, great ways for us to spend our lives in terms of self-inquiry and mastery and love and being present. So, I would hope that everybody could give themselves the compassion that they need so that they can give it to their children. It's that whole idea of putting the oxygen mask on yourself first so that you can give it to your kids. See your children beautiful. I always like to say, if you can see your children beautiful when they're melting down and saying the things that are hard for you to hear. I'd like, in my courses, I say children need our compassion the most when they appear to deserve it the least.
Yes. Katherine, thank you so very much. Please give us your preferred website for people to reach out and find out more about what you do.
Yeah, so consciousparentingrevolution.com is my website. And, I have a newsletter. I post blogs every week. There's a ton of content there. I have a free ebook. And I do these 90-day parenting reset programs, which sound very similar, but there might be different material. One never knows. I love to train with so many people. So yeah, it's a good resource. I have some TED Talks out there as well on parenting. So Katherine Winter Sellery on TED Talk, and all of it is, it's right there at your fingertips.
Thank you so much for the work you do. I really enjoyed your TED Talks. I think they're great. You're a fabulous speaker. And I just really appreciate another person on this journey of saying, like, this is a revolution. I think the word revolution is great because this is a revolution. It's a huge change in the way we are looking at things. It's an evolution, and it's saying, oh, yes, maybe the way that we learned things, there are maybe some things we want to keep, but a lot of things aren't so great. And we can start to turn it around. We can start to make a change. We can change these generational patterns. So I want to thank you for doing that work, for sharing it with us, for enlightening us and being a voice to be part of that change. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, obviously you're a revolutionary as well. So it's great to be on the path. And I'm imagining your community are also all revolutionaries. So, we're all in the midst of transformation.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Mama podcast.
Seriously, thank you for listening. Sora is helping me here with my intro and outro today. I love what Katherine had to say, and I really think that's true, that what happens in the micro level of our families, it's really part of what is happening in the macro level. And so we can start to change minds and be part of this evolution of parenting. So I hope you'll join me in that. I'd love to hear your ahas from this episode and your takeaways. You can take a screenshot of wherever you're listening and just share that screenshot and tag me in that. I'm at Mindful Mama Mentor on Instagram, and I'm at Facebook. And yeah, so let me know. And if you're enjoying the episode, the podcast, please, of course, subscribe and leave a rating on Apple Podcasts and share it with your friends and all those good things. Let them know that what they can learn from this episode so that we can spread the healing, good knowledge that, we're all developing a real time here together to help us grow and evolve and do better for one another as human beings, which is so cool. Isn't that so cool, honey?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad to have been able to connect with you. I hope that you have some peace, some relaxation, some fun, maybe a little mini dance party or something this week that brings you some joy. And I will be back in your ears next week on Tuesday. So I'll talk to you then. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Bye.
I'd say definitely do it. It's really helpful. It will change your relationship with your kids for the better. It will help you communicate better. And I'd say communicate better as a person, as a wife, as a spouse. It's been really a positive influence in our lives. So definitely do it.
I'd say definitely do it. It's so worth it. The money really is inconsequential when you get so much benefit from being a better parent to your children and feeling like you're connecting more with them and not feeling like you're yelling all the time or you're like, why isn't things working? I would say definitely do it. It's so worth it. It'll change you.
No matter what age someone's child is, it's a great opportunity for personal growth and it's a great investment in someone's family. I'm very thankful I had this.
You can continue in your old habits that aren't working, or you can learn some new tools and gain some perspective to shift everything in your parenting.
Are you frustrated by parenting? Do you listen to the experts and try all the tips and strategies, but you're just not seeing the results that you want? Or are you lost as to where to start? Does it all seem so overwhelming with too much to learn? Are you yearning for a community of people who get it, who also don't want to threaten and punish to create cooperation? Hi, I'm Hunter Clark-Fields, and if you answered yes to any of these questions, I want you to seriously consider the Mindful Parenting membership. You'll be joining hundreds of members who have discovered the path of mindful parenting and now have confidence and clarity in their parenting. This isn't just another parenting class. This is an opportunity to really discover your unique, lasting relationship, not only with your children, but with yourself. It will translate into lasting, connected relationships, not only with your children, but your partner too. Let me change your life. Go to mindfulparentingcourse.com to add your name to the waitlist, so you will be the first to be notified when I open the membership for enrollment. I look forward to seeing you on the inside. mindfulparentingcourse.com.